In the endless dark of the galaxy, empires rise and fall. Some command fleets so vast they blot out suns, while others vanish without ever leaving a trace. Among them all, one reigned supreme. The Galactic Empire had endured for millennia, spreading its dominion over 1,000 star systems, ruling with iron discipline and unquestioned cruelty. Its laws were simple: kneel, obey, and serve, or be destroyed. Species across the spiral arm whispered in terror of its power, for its fleets had descended upon a world and erased entire civilizations in hours. To the Empire, war was not survival nor necessity. It was performance. Every conquest was theater. Every suppression a display meant to remind lesser beings of their place in the great order. It had no rival that could challenge its strength, no equal who could contest its fleets. In its arrogance, the Empire believed it was eternal. Humanity was, to them, insignificant, a species clinging to fragile colonies, barely stepping onto the galactic stage, considered backward, naive, and weak. The Empire tolerated them at first, as one tolerates insects in a garden. Humanity expanded into a few dozen systems, eager to build a future beyond Earth. Yet their independence, their unwillingness to kneel, soon drew the gaze of the Empire. To defy orders, to resist tribute, to act without permission, these were sins the Empire never forgave. And so, humanity's name was etched onto its list of defiance. The first clashes were small. A colony resisted imperial tariffs, and an enforcement fleet was dispatched. Human ships, though fewer and outgunned, fought savagely, surprising their enemies with their refusal to break formation even when doom was certain. The Empire crushed them effortlessly, yet behind the victory, unease grew. For these humans, unlike so many other species, did not bow once beaten. They fought again. They rebuilt. They dared to strike at Imperial patrols, harassing supply lines, raiding depots. A spark of resistance that most species never kindled began to glow hotter with every skirmish. The Empire, insulted, decided to make an example. It escalated the war, not merely fighting but crushing human fleets wherever they appeared. Entire colonies were blockaded. Refugees were driven into space with nowhere to run. Yet even in desperation, the humans fought with a fury that disturbed their overseers. Their ships rammed when out of ammunition. Their soldiers fought with blades when their guns ran dry. Their refusal to surrender became legendary among Imperial commanders, who came to regard them as a nuisance unworthy of mercy. Then came the battle that changed everything. A human squadron was intercepted near a border system, its vessels crippled and boarded. The survivors, numbering in the hundreds, were taken alive. By the laws of war, ancient, codified, and widely respected across the galaxy, prisoners were to be held, exchanged, or enslaved. But the Empire had grown tired of rules when it came to these humans. Rules were for equals, and humanity had not earned that title. Instead, the captives were condemned not as soldiers, but as vermin. A decision was made at the highest levels. A demonstration was required. The humans would be put to death, not quietly, not mercifully, but publicly. Their execution would be broadcast across a dozen systems as a warning. In the heart of an imperial stronghold, the humans were gathered, bound, stripped of armor. They stood surrounded by the Empire's citizens, who jeered and mocked. The soldiers did not plead. They did not beg. They met their fate with silent fury. And then the fire was lit. One by one, row upon row, the prisoners were burned alive. Their screams filled the arena as alien crowds cheered, intoxicated by the display of absolute dominance. The fire consumed flesh, bone, and hope until only ashes remained. For the Empire, it was a message. This is the fate of those who defy us. For the galaxy, it was a spectacle, broadcast across channels as proof of the Empire's unyielding strength. But for humanity, it was something else entirely. The transmission reached Earth. It reached Mars, Europa, the colonies of Alpha Centauri, the outposts on the rim, the ships wandering between stars. Every human saw it. Every family who lost a son or daughter to the war now saw their children burn like animals for entertainment. Mothers collapsed in grief. Fathers clenched their fists in rage. Siblings swore vengeance in whispers and cries. Shock gave way to sorrow, and sorrow hardened into fury. Humanity, divided by politics, culture, and distance, suddenly became one. No government could contain the fire that now spread across every colony. Soldiers demanded retribution. Civilians volunteered for service in numbers never before seen. Factories shifted overnight into war production, churning out weapons, armor, and ships. On Earth, leaders convened not to negotiate, but to declare there would be no peace. There would be no forgiveness. The atrocity had united them as nothing else ever had. The oath was simple, and it spread like wildfire across human space. No more prisoners. If the Empire had sought to break humanity's will, it had instead ensured its destruction. By burning those soldiers alive, it did not extinguish human resistance. It forged it into steel. Humanity no longer fought for survival, or territory, or independence. It fought for vengeance. It fought for memory. It fought to make the galaxy understand what it meant to cross them. From that day forward, every human soldier carried a memory of the fire in their hearts. Every pilot who launched into the void heard the screams in the silence of their minds. Every commander who issued orders swore they would repay the atrocity 1,000-fold. There would be no mercy, no hesitation, no surrender. The Empire had shown humanity its truest face, and humanity now showed the galaxy what its fury looked like. Ships once designed for exploration were reforged into vessels of war. Colonies once dedicated to science and trade became armories and foundries. Every resource was bent toward one goal, the total destruction of the Empire. Humanity declared war not as a campaign, not as a conflict with limits, but as an existential vow. They would not stop until the Empire burned. And so the galaxy shifted. Where once humanity was dismissed as weak, now whispers spread in taverns, markets, and command centers. The humans had seen their people burn alive, and they had sworn revenge. Other species watched carefully, some in horror, some in secret admiration, for they knew what the Empire had done, and many of them remembered their own dead. Yet none had ever dared to rise as humanity now rose. The Empire, arrogant as ever, scoffed at the human vow. To its rulers, it was laughable that a species so young believed it could challenge them. They dismissed human fury as the tantrum of children. They did not understand what was coming. They did not comprehend that in that single act of cruelty, they had awakened something relentless, something ancient, something unstoppable. The fire they lit did not end in the arena. It spread across the stars, carried in the hearts of billions of humans. It was no longer the humans who feared the Empire. It was the Empire that had unknowingly sown the seeds of its doom. From the ashes of the burned, humanity rose united, merciless, and sworn to vengeance. And their war had only just begun. Humanity had declared war, but words alone could not defeat an empire. To match the colossal fleets of their enemy, they needed transformation, and so they forged it faster than anyone thought possible. Every world, every station, every shipyard bent to single will, vengeance. Civilian factories shut down consumer goods and converted overnight into weapons production lines. Orbital docks that once built trade vessels now laid keels for warships. Colonists abandoned peaceful endeavors to mine their planets for metals, gas, and fuel. Scientists who once dreamed of exploration now turned their brilliance toward weaponry, propulsion, and armor. Every ounce of ingenuity humanity was redirected into the machine of war. Draft orders swept through every colony. Volunteers filled ranks before conscription even needed to be enforced. Men and women stepped forward, not for glory, not for duty, but because they could not forget what had been done to their people. Some came with grief carved into their faces, others with fury blazing in their eyes, but all carried the same vow: no more mercy, no more compromise, no more surrender. Entire generations reshaped themselves for war, as if the atrocity had awakened something long dormant in their blood. At first, the Empire scarcely noticed. Their fleets still outnumbered humanity's 100-to-1. Their resources dwarfed those of Earth's scattered colonies. But arrogance blinds and arrogance kills. They believed they had time, that the humans would rage and thrash like children before being crushed under a final boot. They underestimated the speed at which humanity adapted, the willingness with which it sacrificed, the brutal creativity with which it fought. The first retaliations were small. Human raiding parties struck border outposts, cutting off communications and stealing supplies. Imperial commanders scoffed at these attacks, calling them undisciplined piracy. But soon the raids grew bolder. A convoy of fuel transports vanished. An entire listening post was destroyed without a trace. A patrol squadron found its ships reduced to drifting wrecks after stumbling into a human ambush. Each loss was dismissed at first as an inconvenience, but unease began to creep into the edges of Imperial command. For the humans were not merely fighting, they were studying. Every battle became a lesson. Every captured fragment of technology was repurposed, modified, and improved. Human engineers worked night and day, hacking apart captured weapons, bolting alien systems onto their own ships, pushing their vessels far beyond intended limits. What the Empire saw as crude improvisation was in fact ruthless ingenuity. Where other species obeyed the rigid doctrines of war, humanity broke them without hesitation. And with every battle, their doctrine grew more brutal. No prisoners were taken. No surrenders accepted. Imperial soldiers who once mocked human resistance now begged for mercy, only to find none. Word spread quickly through the ranks. Capture meant execution. Defeat meant annihilation. Fear crept into the Empire's soldiers as they realized these humans did not play by the rules of galactic war. They fought as if every battle were their last. In doing so, they made it their enemies' last instead. The Empire responded with fury. Larger fleets were dispatched, determined to crush the insurgency. Yet again and again, those fleets returned in pieces, or not at all, for the humans fought with ferocity none had faced before. They turned asteroids into fortresses, hiding cannons within hollowed rock. They used mining equipment to tear apart enemy hulls. They rammed crippled ships into capital vessels, detonating reactors in suicidal charges that destroyed entire formations. Death did not frighten them. It only fueled their wrath. At first, the Empire's commanders dismissed these tactics as desperation. But desperation should not have brought victories. Desperation should not have destroyed battleships or driven cruisers into retreat. And yet it did. Small human fleets began defeating larger Imperial forces, outmaneuvering them, ambushing them, striking where they were weakest. The galaxy watched in shock as the impossible became reality. The Empire was bleeding. Every human victory became legend. A single destroyer, outnumbered 5-1, held off an entire squadron long enough for a convoy to escape, detonating itself in a blaze that took its enemies with it. A colony, under siege and cut off from reinforcements, built makeshift weapons from mining rigs and tore apart Imperial landing forces in the dirt of their fields. A group of Marines boarded a dreadnought, fighting hand-to-hand through its corridors, and left it burning from the inside out. These stories spread not only among humans but across alien species, carried in whispers. The humans do not break. The humans do not forgive. The humans will kill you even when they die. The Empire tightened its grip, believing overwhelming force would end the war. But overwhelming force no longer guaranteed victory. For the humans had learned something essential. To win, one did not need to be stronger, only more relentless. They struck from shadows, ambushed supply lines, and disappeared into the void before counterattack could land. They fought like predators, forcing their prey to exhaust itself chasing ghosts. And all the while, they grew stronger. Fear began to seep into the edges of the Empire. Soldiers whispered in barracks about the human oath, about what happened to captives. Commanders reported increasing difficulty keeping their troops steady in combat against human forces. For every battle left not just scars on fleets, but terror in hearts. The image of burning prisoners had once been the Empire's weapon. Now it was humanity's, a memory that drove their vengeance and spread dread among their foes. The turning point came not in a skirmish, but in a battle that shook the galaxy. An Imperial fleet, vast and overwhelming, descended upon a human system to crush resistance once and for all. Their numbers dwarfed the defenders, their firepower unmatched. By every calculation, victory was assured. Yet when the smoke cleared, it was the humans who remained. Through cunning traps, suicidal charges, and merciless coordination, they annihilated an enemy force several times their size. The cost was immense, but the message was undeniable. Humanity could not only fight the Empire, it could defeat it. News spread like wildfire. The galaxy, long resigned to imperial dominance, began to whisper of rebellion. If humans, so young and so small, could bring the Empire to its knees, perhaps others could as well. Species who had cowered in silence now watched with wide eyes as humanity bled the Empire in battle after battle. And for the first time in generations, the Empire's grip on the galaxy seemed uncertain. Humanity did not seek allies. It did not ask for help. It wanted only vengeance, only fire, only war. Yet its defiance inspired others nonetheless. Even those who feared humans most could not deny what they were witnessing. A species transforming itself into something the galaxy had never seen before. A species that had taken pain and turned it into steel, that had taken grief and turned it into wrath, that had taken weakness and turned it into unbreakable strength. And still, the humans pressed on. Each victory fueled the next. Each sacrifice hardened their resolve. They no longer fought for survival. They fought to erase the Empire from existence. The war no longer raged on the borders. Humanity had carried it into the heart of the Empire. What began as desperate defiance had become a relentless storm of fire, advancing system by system, world by world. Human fleets no longer defended colonies. They crushed strongholds. Human armies no longer waited for attack. They brought annihilation to the enemy's gates. The Empire, once unshakable, now staggered under the weight of losses it could not conceal. Worlds that had never known fear now trembled as human ships emerged from the void. Bombardments fell like judgment from the stars, shattering cities, reducing garrisons to ash. On the ground, soldiers who carried the memory of burned prisoners showed no hesitation, no compassion, no pause. They executed officers, they dismantled infrastructure, they destroyed every symbol of imperial power. Entire planets, once proud jewels of the Empire, were left scarred wastelands after humanity's vengeance passed through. The galaxy watched in awe and terror. For centuries, the Empire had ruled without challenge. Now it bled openly, its defeats impossible to hide. Its propaganda sputtered in vain, trying to paint victories where only disasters lay. Its allies grew nervous, questioning whether siding with a crumbling colossus was worth their survival. Species once enslaved began to rise, emboldened by the humans' fury. Rebellion sparked in places long thought hopeless, and every uprising only stretched the Empire thinner, leaving it weaker for the next human strike. Imperial commanders began to dread orders sending them against human fleets. Veterans whispered the doctrine of no mercy, of battles where surrender meant execution, where defeat meant extermination. They spoke of ships that fought until their reactors detonated, of infantry who charged without fear even when hopelessly outnumbered, of fleets that emerged from the dark like predators and vanished just as suddenly. The myth of human relentlessness grew until it became indistinguishable from truth. To face humans was not merely to risk death, it was to invite it. Still, the Empire clung to arrogance. It could not admit weakness, for weakness invited rebellion. And so it assembled its forces again and again, determined to crush the humans in decisive battles. But every time those battles ended in fire. Each defeat sapped resources, each loss broke morale. Where once imperial fleets numbered in the thousands, now they dwindled to hundreds, and those hundreds feared the sight of human banners on the horizon. The humans did not relent. Their fleets grew larger, their weapons more advanced, their tactics more ruthless. They built ships of terrifying design, bristling with weapons, armor beyond belief, designed not for endurance but for carnage. They unleashed weapons that turned space into firestorms, collapsing shields and melting hulls. They wielded strategies that defied logic, sacrificing ships and men without hesitation, if it meant taking more enemies with them. They had embraced total war, and in doing so, they had become the very nightmare the Empire thought itself to be. Then came the purge. Humanity had not forgotten the worlds that had cheered when their soldiers burned. Those planets became targets, not of conquest but of annihilation. Orbital strikes rained down on cities, burning millions where they stood. Populations that had once laughed at human suffering now found themselves screaming under the same fire. No plea for mercy was answered. No offer surrender accepted. The humans left those worlds in ruins, their skies blackened, their soil poisoned, their names erased from maps. To the Empire, it was a horror. To humanity, it was justice. Moral lines that other species clung to meant nothing now. Humanity had seen its own burned alive, and it would burn others without hesitation. In their march, they carried both vengeance and warning. Never again would their kind be humiliated. Never again would they bow. Never again would they suffer without returning the pain 1,000-fold. And so the galaxy began to fear not just the Empire, but the humans themselves. For in their wrath, they had become something more terrifying than their oppressors. The Empire, desperate and cornered, gathered its might for one final stand. From across its surviving systems, it summoned every warship, every commander, every soldier still loyal. The greatest armada in its history assembled, vast enough to darken stars, a force meant to crush humanity once and for all. The galaxy held its breath, for this battle would decide the future. The humans came, not timidly, not cautiously, but with every ship they could muster. Their fleets surged forward, carrying billions of tons of firepower, crewed by men and women who had sworn to fight until death, who remembered the ashes of their burned kin, who carried vengeance like blood in their veins. The two forces met in the void, and the greatest battle the galaxy had ever seen began. The Empire fought with desperation, hurling waves of ships into fray, unleashing weapons designed to terrify entire species. But desperation cannot withstand determination. Human ships dove into enemy formations, ramming, detonating, tearing gaps into once unbreakable lines. Fighters swarmed like hornets, striking vulnerable points and vanishing into chaos. Battleships exchanged fire at point-blank range, shredding each other to pieces. Space itself seemed to burn as thousands of vessels exploded, their wreckage drifting like glowing embers. For days, the battle raged. Losses on both sides were catastrophic. Human fleets were gutted, imperial formations shattered. But through it all, the humans pressed forward, unyielding, unrelenting, unstoppable. They fought with a madness that no calculation could predict, no strategy could counter. In the end, the Empire's great armada broke. Its ships scattered, fleeing into the void, pursued and destroyed without mercy. Its admirals died on their bridges. Its soldiers perished in their thousands, and its last hope of victory burned away. When the battle ended, silence fell across the galaxy. The Empire, once eternal, was broken. Its fleets were gone, its worlds vulnerable, its authority shattered. Humanity stood bloodied but unbowed, scarred but triumphant. The war was over, and the outcome undeniable. In the aftermath, humanity advanced through the ruins. They dismantled the Empire system by system, seizing resources, liberating or enslaving as they saw fit, erasing their enemies from history. Some alien species welcomed them as saviors, grateful for freedom. Others cowered in fear, wondering if the humans would turn their wrath upon them next. For though the Empire was gone, its shadow remained, and humanity now stood in its place. But humanity did not seek to rule as the Empire had ruled. They sought remembrance. Every child was taught of the atrocity that began the war. Every soldier was reminded of the screams that had lit the fire. Every leader was bound by the oath never to forget. The humans had not fought for conquest, but for vengeance, and vengeance they had taken in full.